Hi, I'm Ryan Bergstrom. I'm an associate scientist for Autism Research Group, and I've been invited to do this skills webinar, and I want to thank you all for attending. And before we get started, we need to do some housekeeping stuff. Some of you are here for CEUs, and if that's the case, you should have been contacted by Alan Ganther and following his instructions for signing in, as he'll be taking roll to make sure you guys are in attendance throughout the entire webinar. So this webinar is going to be a review of safety skills that can be taught to children with autism and other developmental disabilities. I want to start out with this cartoon. It makes a very important point because when we're teaching our children various skills, a lot of times we'll set the mastery criteria at 80% or greater. But in this cartoon, if you can see, the police officer is saying, "What happened here?" And the lady says, "I guess we used too low a criterion." And it says, "Mrs. Walker learns the hard way that sometimes 80% correct just isn't good enough." And I think this makes a very important point when it comes to teaching safety skills. There's zero room for error. If your child only goes with a stranger once out of 10 tries, that's still not good enough. It needs to be 100% to guarantee their safety. Many children each year in the United States die as a result of unintentional injuries. And most of these accidents are the result of fires or pedestrian-related accidents. And children with developmental disabilities are even more likely to be injured than a typical child. Adults with disabilities are at a greater risk of harm than a typical person resulting from crimes such as sexual assault. Now, when it comes to safety skills, a lot of these skills might not be taught in lieu of teaching other important skills that can be used on a day-to-day basis. And so a lot of times people forget, what about this situation? What about that? Well, it doesn't really happen in everyday life, and there's so many other things we need to work on, so a lot of times it slips between the cracks. We did a literature search of the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, as well as PsycInfo, and we used the following terms: safety, pedestrian, dangers, fire, emergency, strangers, solicitation, chemicals, poison, accidents, and sexual abuse. Studies in which behavioral data were not collected, we did not use those. Now, I've separated these into 6 different sections. There are some overlap, but for the most part, they fall into one of 6 categories: pedestrian skills, emergency situation skills, sexual abuse prevention skills, accident prevention skills, stranger safety skills, and loss safety skills. Pedestrian skills involve identifying traffic signs and signals, what they mean, and being able to determine where and when it is safe to cross a street. There were 7 studies that we reviewed, and for the sake of time, I'm only going to go over a couple studies that were representative of the rest of the studies. When it comes to teaching pedestrian skills, the big question is it better to teach in vivo or in a simulated environment? Page et al. Found that participants with intellectual disabilities could be taught pedestrian skills in a classroom setting using a model city and a doll. And these skills generalize to the natural environment. Marchetti et al. Conducted a comparative study on classroom versus community training of pedestrian skills. The community training proved significantly more effective than the classroom training. So to summarize, the effective interventions that were used involved prompting, chaining, and role-playing. And the questions, simulated or in vivo, the results were mixed. Some studies said you can train in a simulated and it'll generalize. Others demonstrated that it was more important or more beneficial to train in vivo. So when it comes down to it, you have to make the determination on an individual basis based on your client. And what is feasible? A lot of times working with children, it's difficult to get the parents to do outings or to go somewhere, and it's just far simpler to do the training in a contrived environment such as a house or in the front yard. And obviously other things you need to take in consideration when deciding to train in vivo or in a simulated environment is the client. Does he have a habit of eloping? Does he run away to get out of work. So if you're trying to instruct him by a street and he's going to take off, he's not going to be safe, so therefore you might have to train in the simulated environment. But you always need to remember to make sure that it does generalize. You can't just have them reach 100% criteria in a simulated environment and say, cool, he's able to cross the street safely with a doll and this little model city, but we're not done yet. We need to find out if he can actually do it in the real life situation. And then Collins et al. Made a very good point that when it comes to teaching safety skills, which can prove to be life-saving, it may be better to train in vivo because of the use of natural stimuli. Then you don't even need to worry about generalization because they're in the actual scenario where they were going to use the behavior. The next section is emergency situation skills. Emergency safety skills may be a skill set that the individual might never have to use, but if they do, it could be life-saving. A variety of skills were taught in the following studies, but the majority focused on teaching how to respond to a fire in a home or building. There were 7 studies in this review, and once again, I'm just going to review a couple that are representative. Risley et al. Used a task analysis with least to most prompting to teach adults with ID to make emergency phone calls. So they were taught various situations and how to identify who to call. If there's a fire, then they call the fire department. If there's someone breaking into the house, call the police. Or if they're injured, call a doctor. So they were taught who to call, how to find a phone number in a directory, how to dial the number, and to give the appropriate information to the operator. And they found that once they trained the skills in one situation, the participants generalized to the other situations. Katz et al. Taught adults with ID living in a group home fire safety skills. They are taught to exit the building during a fire, which they signaled with a fire alarm. They are taught to extinguish a small fire, and they are also taught to report a fire to the proper authorities. In this study, they used vocal instructions, prompting, feedback, and praise. These skills maintained at a 6 to 18-week maintenance check. And that's another point I want to make is with the safety skills, obviously maintenance is important with all skills, but for some skills, they're using them on a day-to-day basis, and it's unlikely that they're not going to maintain. But with these skills, which they may never have to use, maintenance becomes a big issue, and you might need to do booster sessions later on. 3 studies examined the effectiveness of using virtual reality computer games to teach fire safety skills. Paget et al. Used a virtual reality computer game to teach 5 children with fetal alcohol syndrome how to safely leave his home during a fire. The game consisted of maneuvering through a house that was on fire. There were prompts that were embedded in the game that were faded. So when they first started out, there would be arrows leading them all the way away from the fire and out of the house, and the arrows would slowly be faded out until the kid was able to leave the house on their own. All the children generalized the skills learned in the game to the real-world probes, lending support to the use of virtual reality to teach fire safety skills to children with fetal alcohol syndrome. Coles et al. Used a virtual reality game to teach fire and street safety to 32 children with FASD. Fire safety skills taught were moving away from the fire, leaving the home, going to a meeting place, and waiting at the meeting place for a caregiver. For street safety, they were taught to take the adult's hand, look left, right, and left again, checking for cars, and staying between the lines. The virtual reality game had an animated dog that prompted the children through the correct response. And once again, this was faded throughout the levels. Another interesting thing was in the programming of the game, they made sure that any incorrect response wasn't inadvertently reinforced. Such as like if they're guiding the dog, it guides it to the fire, the dog didn't like jump up and down and bark and run around with its tail on fire because it might be entertaining. The kids might like to do that. So they just made sure that the screen just faded to black and started over. At the end of the study, the authors used statistics to determine that there was a significant increase in performance between the pretest and the post-test across all behaviors. During baseline, participants moved away from the fire 0% of the time. After the training, the participants moved away from the fire 18.8% of the time, which was statistically significant. But clinically significant? My whole thing is, if you need to use statistics to determine whether or not you had a significant effect on a child's behavior, then it's probably not going to be a clinically significant result. If I was a parent and my child was only moving away from the fire 18.8%, I want to consider that a success. For other emergency situation skills, a number of methods for training fire safety were used, or used in the above studies. Once again, there's a common theme of role-playing, prompting, and chaining. And they found out that in vivo training was more effective than computer-based virtual reality interventions. Prompting and/or role-playing also proved to be an effective method for teaching other emergency situation skills, such as identifying which people to call during what type of emergencies and how to extinguish small fires. Further research is necessary for effective ways to teach safety skills in response to natural disasters such as earthquakes or hurricanes. And this is probably a situation where virtual reality might be the best way to go, but that is an empirical question. And I don't even know how you would fake a hurricane or an earthquake in the real life to train it, so that might be the only way to go. And we're going to move on to sexual abuse prevention. Persons with disabilities can be at risk of sexual abuse from strangers and/or persons that he or she knows. There were 5 studies included in the review. One was by Hazeltine and Miltenberger, and they taught sexual abuse prevention skills to an adult with mild intellectual disabilities. They taught the participants in small groups using instructions, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback. Participants were taught about private parts and what constituted inappropriate touching, as well as how to respond to an abuse or an abduction situation. They were told to say no, get away, and tell somebody. 7 of the 8 participants learned the appropriate skills and generalized them to real-world probes. One participant didn't reach mastery criteria, but she demonstrated 2 of the 3 skills during the baseline probes, which meant she said no and she left the situation, but she never got to the point where she was informing somebody. Miltenberger et al. Used behavioral skills training package consisting of instructions, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback to teach sexual abuse prevention to women with ID. And then they had in situ training in place as backup in case it didn't generalize. So when they did the real world probe, the skills that they taught did not generalize, and so they began doing in situ training immediately. With the addition of the in situ training, all the participants generalized and maintained the skills. So to summarize these findings, instructions, role-playing, modeling, and feedback were all effective in teaching sexual abuse prevention skills. In situ training was necessary to program for generalization. And there needs to be further research to determine the best method for programming for generalization and long-term maintenance, and whether or not you can actually teach it in a simulated environment and have it generalize. Our next section is accident prevention skills. Some accidents occur in the home setting, and these injuries can result from contact with dangerous stimuli. A number of accidents can be prevented by simply making alterations to the environment, such as locking up poisons or sharp objects or other hazardous materials. And although there's preventive measures that can be taken, it's still important to teach the skills just in case some dangerous chemicals happen to be left out or someone leaves a knife out or something. So they still need to know what to do in case they come in contact with one of these dangerous situations. There were 4 studies reviewed that include accident prevention skills. Tim Chuck et al. Attempted to teach 4 mothers diagnosed with ID to understand dangers in the home, such as fire hazards, sharp objects, choking hazards, etc. And they are taught to make safety precautions. Winterling et al. Taught 3 high school students with moderate ID how to safely remove broken glass from 3 different scenarios: in the sink with dishwasher, on a countertop, and from the floor. This training consisted of instructions, modeling, and a delayed prompting procedure. Feldman et al. Taught child care skills to 10 parents with ID. The skills were preventions of cuts, burns, and bruises, and how to know when you should contact a doctor if your child is sick. Skills taught were taught via an audio-visual child care manual. Summers et al. Taught 3 children with ASD to respond appropriately to the presence of household chemicals, as well as to respond appropriately to the doorbell ringing. So they were taught via rules, prompting, and reinforcement, and they were taught that if they saw chemicals, first they were taught what chemicals were, and then they were taught if they see chemicals to not touch them, move away, and inform their caregiver. Same thing with the doorbell. If they're in a living room, the doorbell rings, they don't run and open the door. They're taught to move away from the door and inform the caregiver that someone's at the door. Accident prevention skills may protect an individual or an individual's child or children from unnecessary injury, and these skills could potentially be life-saving skill set for an individual or a person close to that individual. Moving on to stranger safety skills. Abduction or mistreatment by strangers is another potential risk for people with TD. There are 2 studies reviewed. Both used instructions, role-playing, and prompting, as well as multiple exemplars of strangers, lures, and settings. When it came to the generalization of these skills, only one of 3 consistently performed up to criteria during generalization probes, and generalization only occurred after in vivo training was added. And now moving right along to safety skills involving when a child is lost. Taylor et al. Taught teenagers with autism to seek assistance when they were lost. The teenagers had a pager, and they were taught that when the pager vibrated to find an adult and hand over a communication card informing them that they were lost and to please contact their guardian. All the participants learned the skills, and 2 of 3 generalized to real-world probes 100% of the time. The 3rd participant responded correctly only once out of 2 real-world probes. My colleagues and I taught 3 boys with ASD to seek assistance from store employees when they were lost. We used in situ training, role-playing in the situation, prompting, and feedback. And these skills generalized to novel stores during real-world probes. The thing that was interesting was this, was the kids were taught, once they realized they're lost, they would yell out for their mom or their dad, and if that didn't work, they would find an employee and tell the employee, "Can you help me find my mom? I'm lost." The interesting thing was the kids were doing it perfectly in post-training, but the store employees were terrible at actually reuniting them with the parents, which was scary. The kid would go up, "I'm lost." "Okay, just wait right there. I'll get someone to help you." And then the employee would go back to their job and leave the kid standing there. So that was shocking, where they did the correct behavior, but the contingencies of being matched up weren't there. And so, but that only happened a couple times. Other times the stores would make the announcement and the parent would come get the kid. But it was scary to see that maybe the stores need more training as well as the kids. So to summarize, a number of effective measures to teach safety skills to persons with developmental disabilities have been developed over the previous 30 years. These interventions range from development of virtual environments to cardboard models to prompting and reinforcement. Most of these studies combined a multitude of components into their treatment package, making it difficult to attribute the treatment success to any one particular component. However, when looking at the diversity of the interventions, there's a common theme with all the ones that were effective, and that was the use of role-playing, prompting, fading, and reinforcement. The results are mixed on whether to train in a simulated environment or in vivo, except for safety skills involving strangers and sexual abuse prevention, where it's imperative to train in vivo with multiple exemplars. Future research should focus on determining which intervention is the most efficient and effective for each skill set and what's logistically feasible. Because what may be most effective might not be feasible for just a typical program working with a kid with autism. It might not be possible to go to numerous locations and practice these skills. So that's the other thing future research needs to evaluate. If it's impossible for the parents to go out and do it, it's not feasible, then we need to come up with a way that ensures generalization. And going along with that, need to match the intervention to the individual's characteristics. Like when I was giving an example of a kid teaching them to cross the street, if they have a habit of eloping, then it might not be good to train in vivo until they get the skills down in a simulated environment. Now, we're currently doing a study, an ARG, on teaching sexual abuse prevention skills to children with autism. Actually, it's stranger safety, abduction skills. This was our pilot data, which we did beforehand, because one of the mothers of a client was saying that her son is 8 years old now, and he's too big to go into the women's restroom with her. And so she said, I don't feel comfortable him going to the men's public restroom. What if someone tries to get him to go in a stall or tries to do something to him? And so that's where this came from. So he had autism and he's receiving ABA services from CARD. And he is vocal and able to follow instructions. So we just specifically taught for restrooms because that's the only thing the mother was concerned with. And we taught in the home using vocal instructions, prompts, and role-playing. And so we just said, all right, pretend you're in the bathroom and a stranger asks you, hey, can you come in a stall with me? I need some help or something. We'd teach a variety of different lures, and he would always say no, leave the restroom within 5 seconds, and tell his mother. So this was the data. In baseline, he was responding to the lures. He would go with a stranger, go into the stall. And the baseline was conducted in real-world probes. Like I said, the training was all in the house. And then after that, we went back to the real-world probes, and he nailed it. And he was actually really proud. After he ran out of the bathroom, and he informed his mom, oh, the stranger wanted me to go help him in the stall. And she's like, oh, well, thanks for letting me know. And then as they were leaving, he got all excited and said, I did it in a real-life bathroom. And he was really proud of himself, so that was cool. And then one of our fellow researchers, he was waiting in the restroom at McDonald's because we wanted to make sure that it was a novel environment that wasn't associated with his therapy at all. So we had the mom stop at a McDonald's on her way to the office, and our research assistant was waiting in the stall for him. And that research assistant has never gone back to that McDonald's again. So it was kind of funny. So the intervention was effective and generalized to real-world probes without in vivo training. Now, with autism spectrum being such a large spectrum, interventions like this one might only be effective on a small percentage of those kids. And the intervention may vary based on the functioning level of the individual. So if the kid doesn't have rule-following behavior, then this probably wouldn't be the way to teach stranger safety or sexual abuse prevention. Before I go into this, I want to talk about the other current study that's going on at ARG. It's the stranger safety. And the one funny, it's just basically the same thing. It's just different environments. If a stranger tries to lure you away, you say no, you get away, and you inform a caregiver. And so during baseline, a lot of the parents aren't sure how their kid's going to perform, or they're positive, no, my kid's not going to go with the stranger. Or they say oh, he'll definitely go. And it's always surprising, almost every parent is shocked to see that their kid who they thought would go doesn't go and runs away, and they're like, wow, I didn't think he would actually do that. Or others are like, oh no, he knows that he doesn't go anywhere, and they watch, and their son just walks away and goes to a car with a stranger. And so during baseline, it was always interesting to see how each kid was going to respond. And my favorite one was the one kid, I was waiting out front. I was playing the role as a stranger, and the parents sent him out to the mailbox. And I forget what I offered him. I offered him ice cream or some kind of toy or something from my car. And as soon as I started talking to him, he ran up his driveway and hid behind his mom's van. And when he came out, I noticed he was carrying something. I wasn't sure what it was, but he had something in his hand. And so while he was hiding behind the van from me, I could see him peering through the windshield, looking to see if I was there. He stuck out in front of the van the item he had in his hand, which was a digital camera. And he took a picture of me and then ran inside. And I thought, wow, this kid definitely doesn't need this training. Not only did he respond correctly, he actually took a picture of the stranger. So that was really cool to see. I just skipped that. There we go. Now, one thing that all these studies I've talked about is they have in common is they're all empirically validated. They're interventions that are backed by research, and they've been published in peer-reviewed journals. And so you know what you're getting when you sign up for them. Now, there's numerous other interventions that come off as being scientific, but they're not backed by any research. It's what's known as pseudoscience. And Wikipedia defines pseudoscience as a claim, belief, or practice which is presented as scientific, but does not adhere to a valid scientific method, lacks supporting evidence or plausibility, cannot be reliably tested, or otherwise lacks scientific status. Now, example, I just choose this example because it was in the news recently, magnet therapy. The idea that magnets have like some kind of healing benefit has been around for years and years. And the one example is in the mall, you see like them selling bracelets that have like a magnet on them. They say like, oh, it gives you more energy and gives you more awareness and more balance. And you'll actually see them in the kiosk like putting it on people and like pushing them and making them think that they have better balance or feel more energized. And that's a good example of pseudoscience in that someone actually filed a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit, and these people lost for false advertisement because they didn't have any research to back their claims. And I think they had to pay something like $50 million in a class action lawsuit. And someone once said that the less that is known about a disorder or condition, the more treatments there are for it. And that's common in our field of autism. And there's so many treatments out there, and a lot of them haven't been backed by research. It's not to say they don't work or they do work, it's just we don't know because the research has not been done to validate it one way or the other. And a common theme amongst the stuff, the pseudoscience type intervention, is a lot of times a person will say, oh, well, I did research and it seems like it has a lot of positive benefits. But Google is not synonymous with research. Type in something into Google, you can find out anything. Elvis is still alive. So Google does not equal research. So if you Google something, you're interested, and you find a site, if you go to the website, one of the common themes, if it's not a scientifically validated intervention or treatment or therapy, whatever they say it is there won't be any mention of research on the website. There won't be a research tab. A lot of times it'll have a testimonials tab, which is just a bunch of parents or people that have done it, and they say, oh yeah, this had great benefits. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. My kid wasn't talking at all, and then we gave him shots of pickle juice every day, and then he just started talking in full sentences. It was incredible. But science has taught us that anecdotal evidence is not something that we can rely on. So when you're looking up these things, look and see if they have research. Obviously, if they have research that demonstrates what they're selling is effective, they wouldn't hide that information. They'd put it out there. So it's scientifically validated intervention, guaranteed to do this and this. Another common theme is they're immeasurable claims, stuff that you can't measure or observe, such as going back to the bracelet thing about like, oh, you'll feel more balanced. Well, what does that actually mean in your everyday life when you're walking down the street or you're at work? What does that mean to feel more balanced? You can't really measure that. I mean, if you're talking about like a balance beam, then yeah, you can probably measure that, but I don't think they're talking about balance beams. So I want to talk about some treatments for autism. And like I said before, does it work? We don't know. Like a new one that's out there are autism service dogs. And this ties in with the safety because a lot of parents will say, my kid elopes all the time. We cannot leave the house because he just takes off running, darts into the street. We can't go anywhere. He's going to run through the parking lot. And so they get an autism service dog, and the kid is tethered to the dog, which prevents the kid from running away. So I can see how that would increase the child's safety when walking down the street or walking in a parking lot. If they can't dart so far away from the dog because they're tied to the dog, I can understand that. But there's no empirical evidence to say whether or not it does decrease elopement or has that benefit. But I could understand that. It's the same thing as like a ball and chain or something. If you attach someone to a ball and chain, they're not going to be able to run away. So, but there's so many different companies that offer these dogs, and I was looking it up, and they're run from $15,000 to $20,000 for one of these service dogs. And some of the claims are just incredible that, like, I read on the website, yeah, it helps with this and this. And one of it says it helps teach your child language. Yes, it says it helps teach your child language. How can a dog, which doesn't speak, teach a child to speak? And it just boggles my mind that they can say something like that and sell it, make money, but they don't need to back it up. Another common one that a lot of people know is dolphin therapy. Swimming with dolphins, I can't even remember all the claims they say, but I remember the way they explained it was that the dolphins, when they make their high-pitched noise, it's at a level that activates certain parts of the brain that allows the child to learn and develop better communication and stuff like that. And that goes back to the immeasurable. What part of the brain is it that's not activated, that's suddenly activated by dolphins squeaking? Or if that is the case, why do they need to get in a tank and swim with this animal? Couldn't they just listen to the sounds, the recordings of it? So it's stuff like that that it's interesting. It sounds fun. I would love to swim with a dolphin. That sounds like a lot of fun, but I don't know if you could call it therapy unless you have some type of research to back it up and say, before they swam with the dolphins, they couldn't do this, this, this. We did it. Here they are. And now they're doing this. And to replicate that across multiple participants and publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. And the thing about peer-reviewed journal, a lot of people say, oh, what is that? It's where other fellow scientists in your field review your research and see if it's good enough to make it into publication. And people say, well, that's just like having your friend read your paper and tell you, oh, yeah, it's good. Of course you're going to let it in. But our strictest audience is our fellow scientists, because they don't want bad research published in the journal in their field because it'll make the field look bad. So, of course, they're going to be the most stringent on what gets through and what gets published. So if it's not good, solid research, it's not going to make it in. That's why it's important to look, when you're looking up the research, to make sure it's published in peer-reviewed journals. Now, another one I've heard about, music therapy, and where they dance around to music. And like I said, there's so many different claims. Like I don't even remember which one does what, but it's all similar situations, similar claims. They can't really explain how it works, but it just works, according to them. Hippotherapy is the horseback riding therapy, and I do not know why it's called hippotherapy, but apparently riding on a horse can increase language and whatnot, socialization skills. Now, I can see if you're using it as an activity to get the kid out of the house. He's going to go and be with other peers that possibly have developmental disabilities. The parent will be able to socialize with other parents that are in similar situations. And this may provide opportunities for the kid to work on social skills. When they show up for the hippotherapy, they will see other kids and they could say hi and reciprocate and talk and work on it. So it might be a fun activity and present them with opportunities to work on skills that they've been taught. But I don't know if you can call it therapy unless, once again, it's been backed by empirical evidence that it has a therapeutic advantage. So, like I said, the both ones I've been talking about, we don't know if it works. Could work, could not work. We don't know because there's no research saying one way or the other. But there are a couple that used to be in that category but are no longer. A popular one is facilitated communication. This is where the person couldn't speak, and so they'd have a keyboard, and the person would guide their hand and help them type. And people just couldn't believe it. It was just opening up the whole new world. Now their kid could connect with them. Their kid was talking in full senses, saying all this stuff. And a lot of it wasn't good. Some of it was kids were saying that they are being molested by their parent. And it ended up a man was arrested and sent to prison, all based on this. And then when they finally did research on it, it showed that the kid wasn't the one, or the person wasn't actually talking. It was the communicator, the one that was guiding their hand and helping them type, was the one that was creating the words that they typed. And they designed a study where they had a divider down the center of the table, and they would show the person, the communicator, an item, and then they'd show the participant a different item. And then they'd say, please type what you saw. And the communicator didn't know that the person next to him was seeing a different item. And he typed 100% of the time the item that he was showed, not the item that the participant saw. And so that was debunked. And after all that, the man was released from prison. But I don't know how you recover from that. The other one was HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. That's still pretty popular. It's where you put the kid in a compression chamber and it's pumped full of pure oxygen. And they thought this had a lot of benefits. And so a study was done. There's actually 2 studies published that demonstrated that there wasn't any significant difference between a group of kids that were receiving HBOT therapy along with their ABA therapy compared to a group that just got the strict ABA therapy. And there was no significant difference under any category. They measured hyperactivity, language, communication, problem behavior. They just measured everything under the sun, and there wasn't any significant difference between either group. Now, the thing is, there's so many different treatments out there. And a lot of them sound fun, a lot of them are simple, and it's kind of like, well, if it has a shot at working, I might as well try it. But a lot of times it comes with a hefty price tag. So just be a careful consumer and question everything. As soon as they start asking you or telling you, oh yeah, we can provide this and this and this, and if your child signs up for this type of therapy, you're gonna get all these benefits and stuff. That's when, as a consumer, you ask, well, have there been any research studies published in peer-reviewed scientific journals on this? And if there has, then they will gladly show it to you because it'll help sell whatever they're trying to sell. And if there's not, then they'll be like, oh, well, no, but we talked to so many parents and so many people have tried. They've been so happy with the results. And my point is, a lot of people confuse skepticism with pessimism. Oh, you should be more optimistic. You need to think that it's going to work and just go into it with a positive attitude that, yes, this is going to help them out. But no, skepticism is not pessimism. Science doesn't require belief. If it's going to work regardless of you believe it or not. If you have a bacteria infection and you take penicillin, the penicillin is going to kill the bacteria. Whether you believe it will or not, it's going to kill the bacteria. So don't feel like it's being pessimistic if you're questioning repeatedly and want to know exactly what you're going to be buying. Other questions to ask them is like, how does this work? Like, I get it. You put the kid in the tank with the dolphin and they swim around and interact with the dolphin, but how does that promote language? Because the dolphin's not talking to them, so how is this going to work? And I never had that conversation with one of them before, so I'm curious to know how they'd respond, but I'm guessing it'll be some kind of scientific or sounding scientific response about, like I said before, that breaks up parts of their brain that haven't been activated, the high frequency of the noises, and like all this stuff. It'll be something that sounds very complex and very scientific, but yet if you further question them, they're probably not going to be able to explain exactly what they're talking about. And so my thing is, avoid being fooled by playing a fool. Just play dumb and say, I'm sorry, I'm just not getting this. I understand what you're saying, that he's going to be able to talk and have better social skills and make more friends when he swims with a dolphin, but I just don't get how it works. Can you explain it more? Or can you give me a specific example of what the dolphin's going to do to help my child succeed in school better or be better with his peers? And while doing this, that's when you might start seeing some red flags. And these red flags involve the person having a difficult time explaining how it worked. And I was like, well, it's kind of complex because it involves the brain and the frequencies and all this stuff. So it's kind of complex. It's really difficult to say. But we've had so many people do it and they love it. And it'll be so much fun. And I guarantee you're going to. So that's one red flag. Another is they try to defend a lack of empirical evidence, which probably a similar thing, like, oh yeah, well, we haven't really done the studies, but everyone is so happy with the results. People just rave about it. It really changes their entire world and opens up new avenues, and it's just really wonderful. Or another red flag is the person will become upset or annoyed by your questionings. Like, I already told you, if you don't like this, then hit the road. But person that has evidence and what they're selling you is backed up, they're going to be like, oh, no, please, I'm glad you're questioning it. It makes me happy. Yes, here, look, there's a study that was published in this journal. There's the results, and here's this and that. And so, like, when you have the evidence and it's supported by research, you love the questions because you have the answers and you can demonstrate, here is what I'm saying. So they should never get upset or annoyed if you're questioning them. And the other thing is the old-fashioned, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I mean, if you had a choice of having your child with autism swim with dolphins, ride horses, and dance to music, and that would get them to a level of functioning that they're considered recovered and they're like unassisted in a classroom at the same level of their peers and no one can even distinguish them from anyone else, of course you choose the horseback riding, the music, and the swimming with dolphins over 30 to 40 hours a week of therapists coming into your house and working one-on-one discrete child training. Of course you're not going to want that 30 to 40 hours of that when you could just swim with dolphins and ride horses. It's so much fun. So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So in conclusion, message for the parents is a lot of times the person will say, well, no harm, no foul. I mean, the kid's not going to get hurt. He's going to go out, be in the sun, have some fun, potentially meet other people. It'll be fun. So there's no real harm in doing it. Well, I'd agree with that, but only if it's not taking away from time of empirically validated treatments. If the parents have to cancel their therapy session with the ABA provider because they need to go do surfing therapy or they need to go do dolphin therapy, then it actually is doing harm because it's taking away learning opportunities during that time. So if it's not taken away from any of the empirically validated treatments and it's on the free time, then yeah, I'd say if it's fun, it's not too expensive, go for it. It'll give them a chance to generalize the skills they're being taught at home in therapy. They'll go make some friends, may set up play dates. So there could be benefits. I'm just not sure those benefits are the ones that are being claimed by some of these people. And for clinicians, I know a lot of us probably cringe when we hear about this stuff, or we have a client, oh, I'm going to start doing this. And it just kind of makes you cringe, like, no, don't do that. But we got to play nice in the sandbox. And so my advice is be willing to work with the parents. If the parents say, okay, yeah, we're going to try this new surf therapy where we take them surfing. And say, like, okay, and you can inform them, like, oh, it sounds like a lot of fun. It's an opportunity to meet and make friends, but I just want to inform you that there hasn't been any research done on the claims that these people are making, so I don't want you to get your hopes up, but it does sound like a fun opportunity, and you can even evaluate it. You can say, oh, I'll take note on some of the graphs and stuff that you started surf therapy at this time, and you can even show them, like, after they've been surfing like 4 or 5 times or whatever, you can say, like, okay, so they've had like 5 sessions, but if you notice the trend in the data didn't really change any drastically when you started this, so I'm not sure if he's actually getting any therapeutic benefits, but like I said, if it's fun, gives them opportunity to generalize skills, socialize with people, then go for it. Just don't get ripped off. So that's all I got for now.